Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to Shifting Lanes. My name is Hanson. Thank you so much for tuning in. And in today's video, I'm going to employ SJF Performance, putting a bunch of the Solo Spec Coupe performance components into the 2013 Subaru BRZ. I basically went on a Facebook group, North Jersey Autocross Facebook page, and said, hey, is there a good alignment guy in New Jersey? And everyone responded with, you got to go to SJF. So I'm finally here, and I'm going to get this car up to Solo Spec Coupe standards, and I cannot wait to show you what it's going to be like. We're going to first start with the rears. So here's an underneath view of the lower control arm. We've got the tow bar that's being replaced, and also the Swaybars. Of course, you've got the suspension here. It's going to be replaced with the Koni yellows, and also the Eibach springs. So now we've got the Koni rear shocks and the Eibach springs mounted to the rear suspension. Alright, so now the rear is finally done. Steve has put on the suspension, the lower control arm, the tow bar, the sway bars, and it's all buttoned up here. Of course, everything's not aligned just yet, but after we do the front, we're gonna put this down and then just kind of like make sure everything's aligned. But yeah, all of this is together. It looks really, really good. I didn't know what to think about the ketchup and mustard look here, but I think with the blue it looks pretty special. Not that you can see it really when you're driving down the road, but this is cool, and I cannot wait to see what this car is like on the road.
The bottom.
Oh, okay.
The camber bolt. So you had a nice big strong bolt, and we're gonna put in this little wimpy thin bolt.
Okay.
And that
This
will,
wimpy is better, right?
yes, yes. And you see how it has a little cam on it right
Yes.
there? So as you turn that inside your spindle, it will allow the spindle to move in and out.
Okay.
Like that. And we want as far as we can go. Turn this. See how the rotor moves?
Yep.
So that's how a camber bolt works.
So what's happening here is basically we're doing a test fit of the wheel to make sure that there's no rubbing between the wheel and the shock itself, because currently the closest point between everything around here is the wheel itself, or actually the tire itself, with the spring perch. Currently there's a good gap there, but before, what we did before was we used the lower bolt on the top hole, so that way we could get more camber. But since I have a plus 45 offset, that basically produced the wheel to rub on the spring perch. So if I had plus 40 offset, which I don't have the spacers for right now, and I don't plan on having spacers for this setup, but I may eventually do that. But for now, I'm just going to stick with these plus 45 wheels. And so what we did was we used the original top bolt for the shock, and what that does, it gives us basically a more positive camber, or let's just say less negative. So and currently with the setup, with the camber bolt set all the way to max camber, we currently have good enough clearance at the spring perch. So we're going to go with the setup for now. What's happening here is that Steve is having me sit in the car so that he could properly lock down the front suspension setup. We both kind of agree that we couldn't really get any much more camber out of this, just because my wheels is the limiting factor. Could be a lot more aggressive towards 3 degrees, 4 degrees if I had more clearance between the wheels and the struts, but currently that's not the issue. That's not the case. If I had a 5mm spacer, that would make a very big difference. and that's probably what I would have to do if I want to get more aggressive. But given my situation right now, I would have to stick with this camber setting. So while Steve is buttoning up the car, this is the overall report of the car setup. So based off of his machine, we just used a Dodge Viper from 2008 to 2010 as a basis. Again, this tool is designed so that you could set the car to factory settings. So we just basically chose one vehicle just to start, but we set it to whatever we want. So as I mentioned before, the camber is set to -1.7, and then the toe, it's just slightly out. And then in the rear, we set the camber to -1.1. Again, that's just a 0.6 degree off from the fronts. So this is more of a neutral setup. Again, the fronts, we could get a lot more aggressive once we get a 5mm spacer and also extended studs. Alright, so now I have all the parts installed. The Swaybars, the shocks, the lower control arm, all of those parts have been installed, and I've been driving it for, I'd say, a good 200 to 300 miles now. The video footage that you've been watching, that was over 2 weekends ago. So since then, again, I've driven all those miles, and I've also put it through an autocross session.
And a little bit of gas, you go around, left. Okay, just be careful.
So I think I have a pretty good idea about just how this feels compared to a stock setup. Now the Koni shocks are adjustable, so I'd say for the first week I was driving it on the mid setting. There's a full 2.5 turns, at least on my shock anyway. I've heard that there's some different ranges, but for my shocks there's about 2.5 turns from full soft to full stiff. For the first week I drove it in the mid setting, and let me just tell you that that is fairly stiff for regular everyday driving. There's let's just say that your jiggly parts will jiggle more, so it's fairly stiff, but it's still somewhat compliant for daily driving purposes. So after a week of driving in the middle setting, I had to go to New York City, so I don't want to be driving through city streets in relatively rough suspension, so I moved it to the softest setting, and that made a big difference in the ride quality. It was a lot more comfortable, not to the point where it's like the OEM shocks, but the ride was still compliant, the suspension was still firm, but it's not jarring. And then when it came time to autocrossing, I switched it to full stiff. At that point, I just want to be honest with you, because I think I'm going to need more autocross sessions to really be able to tell what having the suspension on the stiffest setting is like. It was really easy to rotate the car. It was more than willing to oversteer. I'm not sure if that's a function of the suspension at the stiffest setting, but I do know that the Swaybars at the rear, it's set on the stiffest setting so that it is more willing to rotate, and in the front Swaybar it's set to the softest setting so that it is more willing to push rather than rotate. So with that setup, that's more of a neutral setup. Again, I may change that in the future, but given the Swaybar settings, does the stiffness of the suspension play a role in the car's ability to rotate or push? Probably. Again, I'm going to have to put in more time, more autocross time, to really double check, to verify how big of a role the suspension settings will play on the overall handling of the car. So actually, this is a good point. If you run Solo Spec Coupe, please let me know what your settings are. I'm interested to see what the optimal setup is. I think it's going to depend on the person and also on the course. But my first autocross session, which once I have the video for that up, I'll link to it right here. Based on my first run, I had everything on full stiff. and I think I might back that off in the next autocross run. So overall, the handling of the car is pretty fantastic. It's greatly improved. You could tell that this is a slightly lower car. The rigidity has gone through the roof. There's less body roll, and given the camber and toe settings, this car, it feels more willing to rotate. It feels like it has a quicker turn-in compared to stock settings. Again, I have to make a comment here about the camber settings. I'm running at -1.7 degrees in the fronts and -1.1 in the rears. With Solo Spec Coupe settings, you could get a lot more camber in the front and the rear, but the front is very limited given my offset at +45. To get more camber out of the fronts, I'd have to get spacers, 5mm spacers, because the limitation for, according to the Solo Spec Coupe rules, is that it's +40 or greater. So if I could push the wheels out a little bit more, I could get a little bit more camber into it. And according to a lot of the autocross greats that I've talked to, more camber means more speed. So that's eventually a change that I'm going to have to put into this car. But for now, I'm going to stick with the +45 wheels, and I think before my follow-up alignment, I'm going to do the 5mm spacer, which I'm going to have to get extended studs for, unfortunately, because I read in the forum somewhere where you could only safely go up to a 3mm spacer if you want to use the existing studs. They're very short, so if you don't change the studs, you have very few thread engagement, and you're running a lot of risk there. So that's a change that I plan on doing in the near future. But anyway, let's wrap up this extremely long video right here. I want to thank you so much for watching till this end to hear this message. And if you like the video, if you found the video helpful and you're thinking about doing this work yourself, potentially, and for your own BRZ or your own autocross car, please let me know in the comments below, and consider giving this video a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to this channel just yet, please do it right now. So with that said, let's just wrap it up right here. I want to thank you so much again for watching, and make sure you're subscribed so that you can get updates to this channel. My next video is going to be my second autocross session in the BRZ, and my very first one in the New Jersey Meadowlands. If you want to really see some truly fast people drive their cars, then that's an event that you definitely have to check out. So again, I want to thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.